Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to be your best self. Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today, we want to get you fired up about thinking about how life could be, will be, or how you simply adjust to what's going on right now. In fact, we're talking about the book, The Long Home, Now and Then. My guest today is author Janet Stilson, and we are going to talk about her newest book, and I think that you are going to definitely love it. Well, she is out of the Oregon, Illinois area, and you can, of course, find her on Facebook. But let me tell you a little bit more about Jan. She was born in the Midwest and was raised by Christian parents in a conservative Bible-based church in small-town America. She married a minister after they graduated Bible college, where they served in the pastoral ministry in Virginia the first few years of their marriage. Returning to teach at the Bible college from which they graduated, they enlarged their family of a son and daughter by one more son. Jan returned to college to complete a master's degree in library science and, after a few years, a master's in biblical studies. She has served in local churches as a musician, a teacher, a committee member, and a mission worker. She has also been active in her community in various restoration projects. The latest, the restoration of the Laredo Taft's famous Black Hawk statue made from steel and concrete. Leading the charge in raising matching funds to a state grant, the money was raised in less than 5 months, and the work on the statue will be finished in the summer of 2019. She loves working with people and helping to solve problems. Her love of writing has led to experiment with fiction, and she finds it a rewarding and joyous experience. It is her hope that readers will enjoy the Long Home series and formulate in their own minds what the future could hold for Christian believers. So let's go on and get your coffee, get your tea, have a seat, and get comfy cozy, because we are going to have a great chat today. Good morning, Jan. Thank you so much for spending the morning with me today.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Now, I love that this book is going to be a series, because that means that we're going to get, some more information, because who doesn't love a good book, right? And you want to be able to go with that book for as long as you possibly can. So I want to ask you, before we kind of get started, what made you decide that this was the time to write this type of book?
Well, I didn't really have this kind of a book in mind. I had published an encyclopedia the previous day. I'd sent it to the printer, and I didn't have anything to do with it down at the computer, and it's like, what am I going to do now? Why don't I try writing a work of fiction, I thought. And so out of it came the beginnings of this story.
So can you give our listeners kind of a summary? What is your book about?
The Long Home Now and Then looks at a fictional scenario of what the future could be in a worldwide peaceable kingdom under the rule of a righteous king. It juxtaposes a secular worldwide secular mystery story against the future realm, and by the end of Book 1, the reader has a glimpse of some of the joys and obstacles awaiting kingdom citizens as they solve never-before societal, geographic, scientific, and spiritual challenges. As the secular mystery is solved, the reader is looking forward to Book 2, The Long Home Consuming Fire, and even to Book 3, The Long Home Outside the Gates, as yet unpublished. Briefly, the murder investigation by a crusty old detective, Given Dickens, focuses on the murder of 2 young men, Adam Hesed and Nimitz Murphy. Sadly, this case happened because one friend was vengeful and sought to bring justice to one of his friends. Even sadder, the murder involved 2 of his friends, which was more than he'd planned. Then he lived with the guilt. The book defines a new genre, millennial fiction, with strong parallels to precious Christian values and sidebars of science fiction and fantasy.
I love how you have decided to blend that together. So it gives you a little bit of everything, and I think that really is going to draw the reader in. Now, I want to ask you about a bit of the title. That's the now and the then. What do you mean by that?
Well, the term now and then is a familiar phrase in American usage, and similar language is found in the Gospel of John, to contrast the kingdom of God which lives in our hearts today with the down payment, you might say, as taught in Ephesians, with the future kingdom of God which will be on earth, and we call it the millennium. I have 3 examples of this. In these verses, a time is coming equals the eschatological thought of then. And so we have John 4:23, which says, "Yet a time is coming, and now has come, when the true worshipers will worship the Father and the Spirit, and in truth, and they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks." And John 5:25 says, "Very truly I tell you, a time is coming, and has now come, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live." And John 16:32, "A time is coming, and in fact has come, when you will be scattered each to your own home." So we see that contrast between what will come and what we already have.
I like that. Now, someone may be saying, I like it too, Dr. Angela. Good guest. I know. I love it when I have good guests on the show. But they want to know a little bit more about the book. You know, hey, I love the fact that I get to spend time with great people. So it's a win-win for everyone. Now, as far as the characters are concerned, what made you decide to choose the characters that you chose? And can you tell us a little bit more about their personalities?
Well, I chose Adam Hesed, Nimitz Murphy, nicknamed Nim, and then Rocky, their friend, who took his name from his love of the Rocky movies. I wanted to have characters that would appeal to young adults, possibly from high school through college age and then adults beyond that. And so I wanted it to be set in the 80s, a period of time which most of us are familiar with, and to develop it from that point of view. And beyond that, once they appeared on the screen, I did this on my computer, it took on a life of its own, and the story came to life, and the characters came to life.
Do you have a favorite part of the book, or did you find that as you were writing that there was a particular chapter or a particular portion within the chapter that you just had so much fun writing that you just loved what ended up being on the paper?
Well, there are several, of course. Some of them are humorous, but the one that really struck me and was difficult for me to work out in language was Chapter 1, which describes the resurrection, beginning with Adam Hesed, who was resurrected from the grave, and describes the cemetery and the blasting of the trumpet as the king comes, and the light on the horizon, and the majestic heavenly bodies with him, and so forth. And so I've been told by my readers that this is a very gripping, emotional chapter, and I really have enjoyed writing it and rereading it as well.
Yes, because that is going to be such an interesting yet glorious time when that happens. And I love how both authors and songwriters really do bring you into that moment and make you think about, what am I going to do? Like, how excited am I going to be when that moment actually happens? Now, why do you include some ancient characters or biblical characters within the story? Is that to help kind of keep with the biblical context?
Well, this opened up to me as I was writing scenes and so forth about Adam and his friends, and it occurred to me, ancient characters and biblical characters will be raised in the resurrection. There's no reason I can't bring them into a future story, and it would be very interesting. So, for example, I brought 2 characters. I named them Mo and Paul. And, of course, those are Moses and the Apostle Paul. And they are new friends. Yeah, they are new friends who discover themselves. And they argue in a humorous way about the priority of the law versus grace. And this wrangling serves to introduce the reader to these concepts if the reader is not already informed or a believer. So it serves as a little bit of teaching on Bible theology disguised as fiction. And it's kind of fun.
Absolutely. The moment that you said that, I went, how ingenious for the person who doesn't know. That is so awesome. I love that. And, I think that that's something that the secular person who reads it is probably going to appreciate, that it's not too heavy, that they feel like you were trying to be preachy, but at the same time, the believer who reads it can kind of follow along without being told that. They're like, oh yeah, I know who that is, or I think I know who that is, and just have some fun added to the story as well. I really like that. Now, your books, the first two in the series, The Long Home Now and Then The Long Home Consuming Fire, cover nearly 1,000 years into the future. Now, what made you think that you should, or that it was even optional for you to do such a large time frame?
Well, it's an auspicious undertaking, that's for sure, and I wondered if I could handle it, because historians tend to deal in short time periods, a decade at the time at most, or maybe even a year. But here I'm talking about 1,000 years. But I introduced the concept at the beginning of Adam's wilderness experience of Ruel, the name of the Almighty Sovereign in the story, can warp time, stretch it, collapse it, skip it, and so forth. So that gives me, as author, the liberty to do the same. So the reader will understand if I'm talking about the first 300 years of the millennium, and then in the next chapter or so we skipped to 500 years, and there'll be an explanation for why that happens. But it gives me license to also stretch time, so I can cover a lot of territory. Book 1 deals probably with the first half of the millennium, and Book 2 finishes it up. And so I had to do that so that I, had a frame of reference within each book.
Of course. And, it's so smart that you did that as well, in that you don't feel as though you had to zip through time so quickly in order to just put it in one book. So I think it's so kind of fun that you can look forward to, oh my goodness, there has to be a part 2. When's the next book coming out? The same way that we do with a really good movie, and that person who we thought was gone, you see a toe kind of poke out there at the end, and you're like, yes, there's going to be a sequel. I love it. I love it. Well, it is almost time for us to go to break, Jan, but I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to follow you online, as well as pick up a copy of your book. So if you could please remind everyone the title, where can they get it, and how do we follow you online?
Yes, I'm on Facebook, and the book itself is on Facebook as The Long Home Now and Then, and the book is available on Amazon.com. You can search my name, or you can search the title to find it. Book 2 is also available. And it should be available in bookstores such as Barnes & Noble or Christian bookstores. If it's not on their shelf, it can be ordered.
All righty, listeners, you know that way you can go and pick up a copy of the book. Don't worry, we'll be back right after this.
Being with Infants by Montessori teacher trainer and world-renowned child specialist Beverly Kovach is finally on DVD and digital download. The long-awaited 3D disc set is essential for any new parent, grandparent, or infant caregiver wanting respectful relationships with infants and their care. Being with Infants is broken down into 20 easy-to-digest video lessons, complete with demonstrations. Everything from diapering, feeding, the proper way of picking up infants, sleep, crying, environment, play, weaning, and much more are covered. Being with Infants is available on DVD and digital download at Walmart, Target, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon. Order today and be sure to follow Being with Infants on Facebook for free bonus content.
Smell Good Spa for the women who are making a conscientious change in their personal care products. Specializing in signature fragrance oils, hand-dipped incense, and wholesome bath and body and personal care products. Smell Good Spa. Use code HELLO25 for 25% off your order. Live good, feel good, smell good wholesomely. SmellGoodSpa.com.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Janet Stilson, and she has written the book, Belong Home Now and Then. It is the latest in her series, and it is quite an interesting read. You're going to love it. Now, Jan, I want to ask you, why does book one, Now and Then, describe a fairly primitive society?
Well, Angela, I assumed that while the righteous were in heaven enjoying the marriage supper of the Lamb, that the prince was on earth with some of his judgment and renovating the earth by fire. And so that whole process would have collapsed and annihilated much of the civilization as we know it today. There isn't anything in the scripture that indicates in the next millennial era that we would have an advanced society. So I had to assume that after all of that recreation of heavens and earth, that we would still be at a primitive society starting over. And I understand that we've done that several times in our earthen history. And so that's why I described it that way in the book.
I think there's probably someone out there going, "Oh, good, we get to start over. Great, no more, no more smartphones or all this social media stuff we have to worry about. Thank God, we're back
Hopefully
to talking
some of their
to
memories
people."
would be clouded.
Right. We can go back to how it was in the 80s. I'm one of those people that remembers the 80s where you still kind of drove by to visit your friends or you sat down at the cafes together. So I can understand that. But everything has its time and place. Now, you've published other books, and we kind of mentioned that in the other segment, some works of nonfiction, one about Chicago artist Loretta Taft, in Art and Beauty, I believe it is, and some other reference books about American church history. In your experience, what is the difference between writing when it comes to nonfiction versus fiction, and do you have a preference?
Well, I like them both. Of course, the research methods differ according to the style of the book. I'm a librarian and historian by background, so I have been a librarian at the Laredo Taft Field Campus, which gave me primary materials to write the Art and Beauty book about the Laredo Taft Eagle's Nest camp up there. And then I was also the archivist and librarian for our denomination, Church of God, Abrahamic Faith. And so I organized their archives and had access to all these primary materials that I would class as a world-class collection, comparable to anything that any other Adventist groups have collected. And I thought, well, somebody needs to publish this material. And so the Art and Beauty book filled a gap in the American art history literature. Nobody else had written this book. And the encyclopedia filled a gap in the denominational literature. Nobody else had written this book, so I feel satisfied with that. But when you're researching for fiction, I discovered it's different because you want background information, but you don't have to rely totally upon the truth of what people say. You can change things a little bit with the storyline. And so that's why you want to be aware of fiction and not take it entirely as truth. Because there is that skewing of the truth and of the facts.
That is so true. I'm glad that you mentioned that. Now, in your the book number 2, The Long Home, Consuming Fire, can you tell us a little bit about that book and how, at what point does it pick up from the previous book?
Well, The Long Home, Consuming Fire picks up where Now and Then stopped. Adam, as a character, is curious about the trial, how it ended, and he finds a way to quiz a person who had been at the trial. Some of them were not brought into the kingdom, and so he couldn't ask, but there was one person who could fill him in on the details of the trial and afterwards. And from there, he picks up the pieces of his life in the new realm and creates a career for himself, educating the children of the village he lives in, which I named Protection, and sending out those children as mature adults around the age of 150 years. So we're living in a time of extended life, and therefore I extended the age of the children to 150. I thought that's kind of funny. And so they are challenged and assigned to travel the world and train the nations about the values of this new global kingdom. It's a noble calling, actually. And Adam is joined in the work by an old friend, Cephas, who has a surprisingly earthen way of speaking and is a good friend and plays an interesting role. So while it's a peaceable kingdom in Book 2, trouble brews through the end of the period and is built up to the point of war through insurrection. And so the prince has to solve his problems with the help of his immortal followers, which include, of course, Adam and Nim and Rocky. Readers have told me this is a great read. It has romance, insurrection, scientific exploration, and war. And I can't tell you more. It would spoil the ending.
You have to purchase the book. I love it. Yes, because you can't give it all away. That's true. You can't give it all away. And I love that. But it sounds so intriguing, and I think that there are definitely people out there shaking their heads, saying, you know what, I do want to read this, because I love how you have blended so many different genres together to make it this really exciting read. I really do like how you've done that. Now, I know that as we write, many times we will get a title first. Sometimes we will write and the title will come to us later. So I want to, if you don't mind, I want to kind of switch gears a little bit and ask those questions of you that perhaps an aspiring artist or author may want to ask. And that is about the title. Did you find that the title came to you first, or were you writing and then the title came to you as you were writing?
I would say, I don't recall the specifics of this, but I would say the title came as I was writing. And it came from a verse I'd read in the Old Testament. See if I can find this here quickly. Hold on. The idea being that we have a promise of a long home. It says, this is from the Sermon Bible, Psalm 77 to the Song of Solomon. Eternity is an abyss in which the mind loses itself in a moment, but that life, the infinite himself, calls long. And another, man goeth to his long home, from the King James Version of Ecclesiastes 12:5. And I thought that was a concept of addressing eternity that we don't generally think of. We don't hear it preached very often, and I thought that's kind of unique. And I wonder if, at first the title was The Long Home, and then I thought, what if I turn this into a series and each book has a specific name? And so that's how it developed as the book developed.
I like that. That's awesome. Well, it is almost time for us to go to break, Jan, but I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to follow you online as well as pick up a copy of your book. So if you could please remind everyone the title, where can they get it, and how do we follow you online?
Yes, I'm on Facebook, and the book itself is on Facebook as The Long Home Now and Then, and the book is available on Amazon.com. You can search my name, or you can search the title to find it. Book 2 is also available, and it should be available in bookstores such as Barnes & Noble or Christian bookstores. If it's not on their shelf, it can be ordered.
Alrighty, listeners, you know you can go and pick up a copy of the book. Don't worry, we'll be back right after this.
Being with Infants by Montessori teacher trainer and world-renowned child specialist Beverly Kovach is finally on DVD and digital download. The long-awaited 3D disc set is essential for any new parent, grandparent, or infant caregiver wanting respectful relationships with infants and their care. Being with Infants is broken down into 20 easy-to-digest video lessons, complete with demonstrations. Everything from diapering, feeding, the proper way of picking up infants, sleep, crying, environment, play, weaning, and much more are covered. Being with Infants is available on DVD and digital download at Walmart, Target, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon. Order today and be sure to follow Being with Infants on Facebook for free bonus content.
Discovery. No, just a sec.
What would it look like if we listened more? Could the right voice, the right set of words, bring us all just a little closer, get us to open up, even push us further? It could, if we took the time to listen. The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories. Download Audible and listen for a change.
Hi everyone, Dr. Angela here. Did you know that Daily Spark is now on Facebook? That's right, you can visit with me at facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I want to know more about what you're thinking. I'd love to know, which interview did you find the most entertaining or the most informative? I want to talk to you, and I want you to be able to talk to me. Simply visit facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Janet Stilson, and she has written the book, The Long Home Now and Then. Now, I want to ask again those kind of general questions of you, and I love doing this because I think it shows a little bit of the personality of each person. So when you're writing, do you find that your writing energizes you or it exhausts you?
Well, it energizes me. I actually have never had writer's block, I'm happy to say. I almost was surprised in writing these first two books. I wrote them in 4 months, over 200,000 words, and it's just like the story flowed. After I stopped resisting having a Christian aspect to it, because I didn't set out to write a Christian story. But you know what? It's part of my core, and it came through, and I couldn't suppress it. And so when I went with it, the words just flowed. It almost felt like inspiration, and I say that very humbly. But it's a great story. I loved it as it was coming out. The characters took on a life of their own, and I enjoyed them, and so I really enjoyed the whole process.
Now, one of the problems that young writers have is that they think that writing means that it has to look like, sound like, it has to be a certain something. So as you were writing, and especially with your first book or so, did you find that there were some misconceptions or that there were some stereotypes that you thought were going to happen that didn't happen for you? Or were you able to kind of work your way around those things that people told you were some potholes? Like you mentioned, you didn't have writer's block. For some people, they believe that that is a part or it's a must in writing. Did you find that you did not fall into some of the common traps of being a new writer?
Well, I fell into the trap of fearing what I was doing. And a friend of mine gave me several books on how to write, how to express voice, how to develop characters, how to do this and that. What are the 7 main things that everybody in the world writes about? And I thought, oh, my goodness, I'm up against such major obstacles. I don't know if I can, withstand this. So I learned what I could from those books, and then I threw them. Well, I gave them back to him. I didn't throw them away. But I recognized that this is my project. It has to be the way I visualize it and the way it comes out of me. And then there will be a lot of editing and revising that goes on. I bet I read these books each 50 times or more. And yes, it's a wonder I don't have them memorized, because you want to be sure that your sentence structure is right and your thought is correct and so forth,
Now, how old, if you remember, how old were you, or did you have a particular experience that happened to you when you had the epiphany of language has power? Language has the ability to change or to bring something into being. How did that change your life if you've had that experience?
Well, that's a very profound question. I suppose that I have always been tuned into language as a little church girl that started Sunday school when she's age of 5. I learned in that first week that Jesus was coming back to earth. And I decided right there in that Bible school, I better be on the side of Jesus. And so words are important. They impact you at the heart level and at the head level. And the words are profound. They can lift you up. I have a cousin who's in the hospital right now from having had a major car accident when his car was on cruise control, and so we're worried that he may never walk again. But he's alive, and we're praying for him. And they're saying day by day he's a little bit better. And so prayer is profound, and the words of the Lord are profound in the Holy Bible. I think I grew up with that concept.
Well, let me tell you, I know that I have enjoyed hearing the words that you have shared with us today about your book, and I think that our listeners are definitely going to enjoy your series that you have made available to us, as well as the upcoming one as well. So for the last time, Jan, if you would please, can you tell everyone what is the title of your book, where can they pick up a copy, and how can we follow you online?
Yes, thank you very much for having me, by the way. This has been wonderful fun. The name of the book is The Long Home Now and Then by Janet Stilson, and it's available on Amazon.com or in your local bookstore, and you can order it through your bookstore or order it online. You can find me on Facebook as Jan Stilson, or you can find the book The Long Home Now and Then, or the second book, The Long Home Consuming Fire. And I thank you very much for inviting me to do this. I really had fun.
Thank you so much for spending your morning with me as well. And listeners, of course, thank you for joining us, and I hope that you have had a great morning as well. Well, as always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, be blessed in the Lord. Bye-bye.